Hi, colleagues. My name is Mike Villeneuve, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Canadian Nurses Association. Glad to have a little bit of time with you today. Regarding the first question about my experience as a policy leader and as a nurse, I started in formally really into that work in the year 2000, but I had actually started my career in healthcare area in 1978. So I've been around it for about 42 years, and most of that time as a registered nurse. I think I had some experience in policy development, certainly at a micro level, organizational level when I spent many, many years working at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre in Toronto. But my awareness of being involved in policy development really began when I moved in the year 2000 to be the senior nursing policy consultant in the Office of Nursing Policy, which is the office of the federal chief nurse. They had that position then in the government of Canada. And that was like a leap from to a different planet. um, Most of it was completely unfamiliar, and none of the rules that go on in clinical areas and my organizational healthcare delivery really applied in quite the same way as they do, or as they might in a policy setting. So they were very, very different. In some ways, the experience over the years since then, I sort of liken to the difference between looking at a car that's come off an assembly line that you can kind of imagine how it moves and works, and compare that to going up to the top of the assembly line and seeing what are all the parts that go into this, and how come these two have to go together first before those two can work, and so on. So it's been a very, very interesting journey. Pardon me. Learning it from a very, very high level, going from an organization to national and international work. I moved from the Office of Nursing Policy in the year 2004 to the Canadian Nurses Association, where I spent 8 years. Some of that time as scholar in residence, where I did a whole pile of different projects around nursing and public policy development, and concluding in the year 2011 2012 when I had the great privilege to lead the National Expert Commission, which was an examination of health systems across the country and ways that nursing might be deployed and mobilized differently to help to make those systems better and more affordable. I then spent 5 years teaching at the University of Toronto. Had the privilege of helping to redevelop the Master of Nursing Leadership program. It was a program in health systems leadership and administration. Master of Nursing was the degree, and at the same time did consulting again around health policy and communication and research sorts of issues. And since 2017, in May of 2017, I've been in the role of the Chief Executive Officer at the Canadian Nurses Association, where a big piece of our work is public policy development and advocacy and all that work around government relations. So that's the short summary of the policy part of my career. So, to the question of how did I develop my policy expertise, I wish I could say that I had an easy and more sophisticated answer than by mimicking other people and good fortune. So, as I said before, I landed in the federal office of the chief nurse with only organizational experience, really. And so I had to look around a lot, listen. I asked a lot of questions. I had the benefit of working with a senior advisor in our office. I was a senior nurse. This fellow was a senior economics person, economist. And Stephen had been a deputy minister and so on in other areas, and was a very, very strong support to the office and taught me a lot about the policy process and how it happens. So I think part of, how did I develop the expertise? I listened, I learned. I think I used to be a fairly quick study. Some of that's sliding a little bit as I get older. And I just really took part in so many opportunities. So if I had a chance to go on a national task force, a panel, there were projects like the Nursing Strategy for Canada, the National Sector Study of Nursing. I got involved in that. I sort of tried to say yes, which had been a habit, a good habit in my career, of trying a lot of different things. I had an opportunity to be posted for, well, the better part of a year, but with the work, but to live some of the time in Paris with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, to look at a global study of the performance of health systems. You really couldn't buy a grad school program that where you'd get that kind of experience. But what I did miss from a good grad school program, I have a master's degree that's very clinical. It's around neurosurgery and that end of nursing. So I have a great degree and helped me to think. But if I'd had a degree in public policy from the Kennedy School at Harvard, that might not have hurt. So there's a lot that is the underpinnings that you probably don't get by just copying other people and watching how they do it. So I think that's probably an area where I fell down a little bit, and it's helped now. Of course, 20 years into it, you learn because you study a lot of it, and in the end, it seemed to me a little bit. I felt almost imposter syndrome when I was asked to write a book on policy and published the textbook on policy from a nursing lens because there wasn't one in the country. So I think that's the best I can share with you, is that my experience in this case was very much apprenticeship in a sense, more than a deep, rigorous graduate education in the area. But it got me through. The third question is around what advice I would have for nursing graduates and graduate students looking to be involved in influencing public policy, nursing policy, and so on. So, first of all, something I referred to in one of the other questions is um, study it. It can be learned, right? And much of the work is often done by dilettantes, doing their very best, but not really coming from a deep body of understanding of how politics works and what do all the words mean? How do you define all that? What's a liberal versus a conservative? What's the history behind all that? And I think understanding government, governance, and policy at an academic level is a good idea. On a practical level, I always say the same to anyone who asks, not just students. If you want to learn about influencing policy and then eventually to influence policy, start doing it. There's boards every day looking for members. We're looking for one right now, actually, at the Canadian Nurses Association on our board of directors. Boards of hospitals, student associations, the professional association, like I just mentioned, uh, the local YMCA. Look beyond nursing, look beyond healthcare, and learn about governance. Look at how organizations, regional authorities, cities, there's all kinds of opportunities. Look at how they make decisions. And we're always looking for nurses to be on a task force to inform us about something, to, an expert in vaping or whatever it is, to go with us to Parliament to help to help do a presentation in a committee study, for example. So I can't say enough about how much I think it's valuable to immerse yourself and just watch and learn. And you may spend a whole year on a board saying almost nothing, remembering that board seats that govern organizations are not your personal lobbying platform, right? Because sometimes I think people think, oh, I want to get things done on LGBTQ issues or women's health or whatever the issue is. I'll join the board and sit there in the seat and yak about that all the time. You'll get thrown off the board. So remember that boards are there to govern the association or the organization with which they are affiliated. So if you don't even know the topic very well, open your ears, open your eyes, less of the mouth open, and take it in. And you'll start to see, oh, that's how they come to make the decision to build 3 hospitals in this city instead of 4, and why they go in a certain place, and so on. Um, A couple of practical things are to first try as much public speaking as you can do, because it helps to be able to have 3 or 4 bullets in your mind all the time that you could talk about. So, for example, if people say, "What is the Canadian Nurses Association seized with right now?" Well, I'm ready this season to say, here's the 3 things, right? So if it's a minister of government or if it's a nurse on the street, I can talk about those things. So have something in mind, know about it, even if it's very narrow, know about it deeply. If you're the kind of go-to person for that narrow thing, pretty soon people start asking you to come along to the party, so to speak. It helps, though, to be able to communicate it well. It would help if what I just said was more concise, for example, right? Shorter is better than longer, usually when you're speaking and writing. And that takes some practice over a period of time to be able to do it in that way. Um, Publish whatever you can so that your name is seen in circles at conferences when you speak, in the publishing world, and so on. And I mean, I started that way, very, one piece at a time, as a co-author with, maybe you're the 10th author on a paper of 10 because you added 4 words, and they're kind enough to put you on, and let it build over time. And then suddenly you've got a 40-page CV that lists hundreds of things that you've done, and boosts your credibility. And all of that, I would say in conclusion, helps you when you work hard in the early days, you say yes to a lot, that you can slightly step back, pardon me, when you start to pass 50 or 60 in my case, then you can be a little more discerning sometimes and saying, "I'm sorry, I don't have time to do that. I can't speak to that issue," and not feel that you're on a constant treadmill. And to some degree, all of us are, right? If you're a busy, engaged person, you'll always be a busy, engaged person, probably. Um, but those would be some practical pieces of advice I would give. Most strongly, get involved, take the opportunities that are out there when they come along. I hope that this short session, I think we're about 10 minutes or so, is helpful to the work in the master's program, Mary, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you for including me.